I'm 47 years old. I have a 4-month-old daughter, my first child, and I've been thinking a lot lately about what kind of father and even partner I would be at the age of 25. And honestly, I don't think it would be that good. So, what I wanted to touch on today is just a little bit of perspective from my point of view about being 47 years old and thinking back about 20 years or so as to what kind of man I was and what I was into and just what I prioritized um, versus, and having a child maybe then versus having a child now, technically middle aged. Um, so the person I was at 25 was in some ways very, very different than who I am today. There are a lot of similarities, of course, because it's still me. Um, but I do think that just to start things off, I prioritized completely different things. Time with friends. Um, Even if I was in a relationship, I always made time to go on motorcycle rides with my friends, go out once in a while, get a couple drinks with friends. I worked a lot of overtime. My paycheck was something that I was always looking at ways to maximize my earnings, um, so I could in turn maximize my spending. This is how I'm packaging it now. Back then, I didn't realize what I was doing. Um, so it was a lot of things, like, oh, well, I'll pick up 2 or 3 extra days of overtime in a 2-week period, and then you know, I don't know, I buy a motorcycle or something, and not with the 3 days of overtime per se, but just saying like, oh, I'm earning X, and now I can spend X. Um, so that was something, I thought about it in terms of what I could do to give me more. Um, I will say by the age of 25, I hadn't traveled. Um, Up until that point in my life, I discovered in my late teenage years that I had a debilitating fear of flying. So I stopped flying. I used to have family in Florida, and I live in Massachusetts. So I would visit them. Once or twice a year, I'd fly down as a kid. And then that stopped. So the person I was at 25, I do believe there's something to be said, and I probably should have prefaced with this. If you're 25, I'm not saying that you shouldn't start a family or get married or any of these things. This is just my path and who I am today and who I was, 22 years ago. And I'm grateful that I've always been a bit of a late bloomer, and done things later than a lot of people I maybe know or I'm very close with. Um, so I think the first part of this, and it's kind of like a three-part series or three chapters to this video, is that the first one is just who I was, and how that's different than who I am today. Um, and I do think because I'm older and I can start to see a little bit of a finish line, as morbid as that might sound, um, 20 years, 22 years, that's not nothing, So having that, and every week or every moment or every however so often making decisions based on the fact that I'm not going to be around as long as maybe I thought I was when I was 22 or 25. So that's definitely been a shift. And I think that most people can relate to that, is that when you're younger, the one thing that I do think is certain is that when you age, if you take the time to reflect, you're gonna find maybe there's decisions you would have made differently. Maybe you look back and smile or laugh and be like, oh yeah, I was a real asshole. I was a real butthead then. That's kind of part one, and that's the obvious part. The second sort of in companion part to part one is that I really do believe there would have been a fair amount of things missing from the man that I was at 25 to who I am today. I think patience, I think perseverance, I think there's a little bit of almost acceptance and sort of self awareness that comes with just being alive longer. I'm not going to compare my life to anybody else's because I think that's dangerous, but I can only compare it to who I was previous. And I think the more that you experience loss, I think the more that you navigate adversity, I think the more that you travel, I think the more that you put yourself into uncomfortable situations, you grow and you learn about yourself in a way where I think you can kind of, whether you know you're doing it or not, because this is my experience, there are so many moments where I'm like, man, such and such experience didn't change me. And then I'll catch myself with my daughter, or I'll catch myself with Janelle, where I'm like, you know what? If this conversation took place 10 years ago, or if this stressful moment unfolded the way it just did 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would have been a nightmare in that same scenario. Instead of being able to, you know, pull back a little bit and see the bigger picture. And that to me, I attribute to, I don't want to say skills that I've gained, but I think the effect of experience, wanting to learn from things that didn't work out the way you thought they would. I think that's a big thing for me in my early to mid 30s. I started really embracing therapy, and I don't want to say self-help, but self-improvement, areas of my life that I could get better or improve upon things, because I didn't want to be the same person, forever. So I think part two is really just the, at age 25, the things that were missing from where I'm at today. And by the way, I do have to say this, just even for myself, for my future daughter watching this, I don't have most things figured out by now. And I think my biggest takeaway about aging and living longer is there's never really going to be a time in your life, or there hasn't been in mine, where someone has tapped me on the shoulder, whether that's God, whether it's a ghost, whether it's my mother even, and say, this decision that you're confronted with or you're about to make, this is the right move. Do this. I mean, you might have friends tell you that and stuff, but that's different. But I think that when we choose to commit to another person, whether it's a relationship, if we choose to become a parent, if we make these choices, one of the things that I've learned, or the biggest thing, is that nothing or nobody is going to let you know that this is the right path, that you're making the right decision. You might have a gut feeling. You might choose to look at signs like, oh, this job was offered to me at this point in my life. It must mean something. Sure, maybe. But, I think being 47 and having a newborn, an infant, if you told me 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's where you're going to be, I'm not even sure I would have had an opinion. And if I did, the sad part is that opinion would have been like, what did he do wrong? And that couldn't be further from how I actually feel today. And that is the most magical part about all of this. The last part of this for me to go over, or sort of to kind of, put a bow on things, is who's the person that I am now, at 47 versus 25. And, which may come up in future videos, but various life experiences, some of which were really, really difficult. I think in that 22 years, when you get married, when you have serious romantic relationships that ultimately end, when you try to have kids with an ex-wife and it doesn't work, IVF in this case doesn't work. When you travel, which is something that I love the experience, or I should say, I love the experiences gained and the perspective gained from traveling and being in the moment when you're there. I hate the physical act of traveling. I hate flying. I hate processing through an airport. I hate long car rides in places where I don't know where the next bathroom's going to be. But I've chosen in that 22 years to do those things, to go to South America, to go to the Philippines, to go on, 10-hour-a-day road trips in another country, just down dirt roads, for weeks at a time. And those experiences have, I think, kind of all led to one place. Really two. One, I viewed having a child and being a parent as sort of this final mountain that I could scale that just so happened to be the tallest mountain that I could find in terms of, and the mountain in this case is just a metaphor for life experience. Um, and so that intrigued me because in the past, when I've gone through a divorce or I've gone through a tough time in my life, I've sort of thrown myself into uncomfortable change for the sake of the experience and kind of like break out of a rut. And so to me, who I am now, the biggest takeaway through all of this at 47 and being a new dad, a new old dad, is an appreciation for the finish line. And I had mentioned something earlier, and I know that sounds kind of morbid, but everything, I shouldn't say everything I do, but most of what I do is guided with this idea that if we're lucky enough to be on our deathbed after however long our life is going to last, and a doctor or whoever says to you, if you got a couple months, or you got a month, or you got 2 weeks, whatever it is, I don't know anybody, and I guess I can only speak for myself, but if I had to guess, I'd say that almost nobody would sit there and go, you know what? I'm glad that I smoked cigarettes. I'm glad that I ate a certain way. I'm glad that I drank a lot. I'm glad that, and it doesn't mean that you would regret everything about your life. What I'm saying is, if somebody, like if there was a God or however you want to spin this, tapped you on the shoulder and said, you can go back and not experience these things, whatever it is. Let's say take away smoking cigarettes. Everybody I know who smokes cigarettes enjoys it, right? So let's say they said to you, we'll give you another 3 months on this planet if we just take that experience away from you. I don't know too many people that would be like, nah, I'm good. Take me now. You know, maybe there is. But for me, and I know this is kind of that was a weird, convoluted way of saying that the reason why I choose to exercise, the reason why I choose to mostly not drink, the reason why I eat a certain way is I obviously, feel the benefits and enjoy the way I feel doing or not doing those things. But also being middle-aged, being 47, having some aches and pains, realizing that, however much I love playing basketball, the arthritis in my right foot makes it so I'm never really going to play the way I used to, regardless of the physical conditioning that I can keep my body in. But these things, having a child now has made me realize, and I had mentioned this in a previous video about, they say that I think it's 75% of the time you spend with your child is going to be from birth to the age of 12. And something like 90-something% will be until the rest of the time until they're 18. And that's the estimated time you'll spend with your child for their life, for your life. And so I realized, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do what I can do to not only, try to be healthy and make it to 12 years or 18 years or hopefully 40 more years. I will stay present and really keep that in mind in terms of enjoying the moment, living in the moment, putting the phone down, prioritizing family. And one of the coolest experiences, and this is where I'm going to leave my bit, one of the coolest experiences that I've had so far in 4 short months is how much my daughter's arrival has narrowed my gaze and made it actually instinctual to prioritize time spent with family. And that might sound like a no shit thing for anybody watching this, but the reason why it's really cool to me is that when you're wondering what it would be like to be a parent, and you have other children around you occasionally, or friends have kids, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I don't get it. Or I don't feel the way they do. All I'm saying is based on my experience, you probably shouldn't feel the way they do. You're not going to. I said to somebody very recently, and I'll end here. Um, our daughter rolled over for the first time on her own like a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago. If you told me a year ago or 10 years ago or beyond that, hey, my kid rolled over for the first time, check this out, I'd be watching these videos and I'd be like, oh, Jesus, I don't care. Yeah, I just really don't. Wake me up when the kid's talking to you or telling jokes or, being, just hammering on you, whatever. But since she's arrived, it has immediately kind of reshuffled priorities, but also naturally, instinctually been this beautiful feeling of, I can't wait to get home. I miss my family. This weekend's going to be so great. We don't really have plans, but I get to spend these 2 full days with them. Believe it or not, I'm actually looking forward to go grocery shopping with all of us today. That'd be cool. And I hate grocery shopping. So I want to ask Janelle like what she thinks. Yeah. So thumbs up for life experience. Pay attention to those things because whether you realize it or not, you're definitely growing and you're changing. Um, unless you're not, unless you don't want to. I do know a few people in my life that are like that. So, all right. Later. Do you think you're a better mother today at 37 than you would have been at 25 or 27? And if so, or if not, why?
Yes. And I do think I'd be a great mom still at 25, 27, in my 20s, because I always wanted to be a mom. And I always loved working with children. Tati, watch the mic, babe. But I think having all the extra years, I'm definitely more patient. And just all the knowledge you kind of learn, even from other people and their families and their kids. I am definitely a better mom now. Set up, financially, work-wise, everything. Yeah, Tati definitely has a better life now than she would have back in the day. Quite honestly, I think I would have been like a single mom in my 20s because I would have chose the wrong man,
You did, yeah, you didn't make that mistake this time.
No.
I'm all man, lady.
So yeah, ultimately, I am definitely 100% sure I'm a better mom now than I would have been in my 20s.
All right, cool.
You're smiling. Oh, toots.